Before we begin, I would like to make a quick statement before we begin. I actually know Spanish and English. However, I am beginning to learn German in my free time, as a matter of fact. However, I don't know much German right now. I know how to say some basic words, and I do know how to pronounce the German alphabet and the umlauts as well, but I don't really know too much German. And the German lines that you will see here and here for me, those lines are those are made in Google Translate, because I don't know much German right now. Uh, so I really and genuinely apologize if I ever butcher, aka mispronounce any of these words. I also apologize if some of these words or sentences are partially or completely wrong. If I am mispronouncing, or if Google Translate misspelled any of these words or misphrased any of these sentences, please let me know in the comment section down below how you would correctly pronounce or spell these words slash sentences. Um, so yeah. Um, Forgive me about that. I'm really sorry if I ever do mispronounce any of these words, and if any of these words slash sentences are pronounced. Really sorry about that. But without further ado, let's get started. Chapter 3. Allo nak Rome. Julia adjusted her voice dropped into a more conversational level. He's finally returning from Hispania today, she noted. The city is practically empty because of the triumph they're holding for him. The two of them continued walking through the quiet streets, with most of the population crowded toward the center of Rome to see the precision. Their neighborhood felt unnervingly still. The silence was broken by a voice coming from a few yards away. It was not Latin, and it did not sound like any of the common tongues usually heard around the docks or the markets. It lacked the familiar sounds of Greek or Aramaic. Ich bin völlig verloren, the woman said to herself. Oh yeah, just as a quick reminder, if you saw the preview video I made a week back, this chapter was actually called Augusta, but I decided to rename it as a last minute decision to Allo nak Rome, which basically means hello to Rome. Um, so yeah. But that's all I have to say. And let's continue with the video. It was a Germanic dialect, likely from the northern provinces near Gaul or the frontier. To Valens and Julia, these words were completely unintelligible, sounding nothing like the Mediterranean languages they were used to hearing in the city. They slowed their pace, looking toward the young woman who had spoken. Valens and Julia stopped in their tracks. A few paces ahead, a young woman stood alone on the sidewalk, looking up at the towering architecture of the city with the wide eyes of an outsider. She was tall and slender, her thick brownish blonde hair catching the fading light. The heart-shaped face and a smooth, elegant jawline looked she looked strikingly distinct from the Mediterranean faces of the city. As Addie pondered the local shops, a shadow stretched across the pavement. A legionary emerged from the corner. His presence filled the empty streets with the scent of iron and oiled leather. He was a soldier of the New Age, one of Caesar's men. He wore heavy studded leather boots that crunched against the gravel, and beneath his suit of lorica hamata, or heavy chainmail, was a thick woolen tunic. On his head sat a bronze Montefortino helmet, its red horsehair plume swaying gently. The soldier also wore a large, thick linen skirt that hung right above his ankles, protected by heavy leather straps. Around his waist was a heavy balteus, a belt decorated with metal studs that jingled like a warning. In his left hand, he gripped a massive scutum. The rectangular shield was a vibrant, blood-red canvas of Roman power. At its center sat a heavy iron boss, surrounded by the painted wings of an eagle, the golden lightning bolts of Jupiter, and rafts of laurel. Valens pulled Julia back into the shadow of a doorway, his hands tightening on her arm. The soldier did not look at them, but the weight of the shield and the glint of the chainmail were a silent reminder of what Valens had just said. The Republic was no longer governed by the bait, but by the men who carried the red shields. The legionary did not hurry. There was a practiced, rhythmic quality to his stride, the iron-studded soles of his caligae clicking sharply against the stone. He adjusted his grip on the heavy scutum, the weight of the large shield shifting easily with his movement, his eyes visible beneath the bronze rim of his Montefortino helmet, remained fixed on the young woman as he veered toward the sidewalk. Addie remained oblivious for a few heartbeats longer, her attention still caught by the shuttered storefronts and the strange, silent grandeur of the Roman morning. The soldier closed the distance with the quiet efficiency of a man used to marching miles without making a sound. He came to a halt just a few feet from her. Up close, the sheer scale of him was imposing. The thick layers of his chainmail vest caught the light, and the red horsehair crest of his helmet added a few inches to his already tall frame. He stood there, a wall of iron and red painted wood, waiting for her to realize she was no longer alone. The air between them grew heavy with the smell of wood smoke and the tang of vinegar wine on his breath. He cleared his throat with sound rasping and low, then settled his weight onto one hip, his hand resting casually on the top edge of his shield. Once the legionary stood just a few feet away from Addie, he greeted her. "Hello there, young lady. Are you here for the triumph of Dictator Caesar?" Addie heard the man's voice and turned around, taken by surprise. "Allo, Lehonar," she responded. She looked at his gear and asked, "Sein sei Zufrialgi einer von Herrn Caesars Legionaren?" The soldier shook his head slightly. "No, ma'am. I am with a unit stationed here in Italy. My sentry was ordered here alongside several other sentries to ensure order and organization during the triumph later today." The legionary looked at her curiously. "What is your name, young lady?" "Ich bin Adi," she responded. "I see," the legionary responded. He paused, noticing her accent. "Do you know Latin?" "Ich kann zwar keinen Latin sprechen, aber ich verstehe es," she answered. "Where are you from, then?" the legionary asked. "Raetia," Addie replied. The legionary scratched at the edge of his helmet. "Where is Raetia exactly? I honestly forgot where that province is located." Addie explained it patiently. Das Römische Raiaten ist eine Provinz in den zentralen Alpen in Bayern. Bayern, Österreich und der Zentralschweiz sowie in Nuda Italiana. Im Westen grenzt es an das Land der Helvetier, im Osten an Noricum, im Norden an Vindelicia, im Südwesten an das Transalpen, Gallien und im Süden an Venetia et Isteria, eine Region des römischen Italiens. She looked at him to see if he recognized the names. Ich komme genauer gesagt aus der Provinzhauptstadt Augusta Vindelicorum. So, you're from Augusta, the legionary said, nodding. Ja, Addie said. And are you here for the triumph? Ja, Addie told the soldier. Ich bin Kunsthandwerkerin. Meine Familie besteht aus Kunsthandwerken und Landwirten, she continued. Ich besuche Rom zusammen mit meiner Familie, den Triumph mitzuerleben. She looked down the street, trying to get her bearings. Weißt du, wo das Gasthaus ist? Meine Familie wohnt dort und ich werde mit ihnen vom Venusien aus dem Triumphzug aufbrechen, sobald die Zeremonie beginnt. The legionary paused, mentally charting the streets. It's actually not too far from here. Just head straight for the next 4 blocks, then turn right, and keep walking until you find the complex. Addie smiled, looking relieved. Dankeschon. She adjusted her cloak and added with a spark of excitement. Diktator Ceasar hat für seinen Triumphzug unzählige exotische Tiere aus Asien und Afrika mitgebracht. Ceasar brachte einst ein Tier namens Camelopardalis mit, ein Geschöpf von der Größe eines Kamels und dem Aussehen eines Leoparden. The legionary remarked, "You are really excited to see these beasts in Caesar's multi-day triumph, aren't you?" Ja, Addie replied. Ich bin daran interessiert, diese exotische Tiere in exquisite zu sehen, selbst weinen sie in Arenen gegahet oder in Schaukampfen getötet werden, oder wenn sie in einen Zirkus, einen privaten Zoo, eines Aristokraten oder in eine andere Gladiatorenarena irgendwo im Land transportiert werden. Es ist wirklich interessant, solche exotischen Kreaturen aus Afrika und dem indischen Subkontinent zu sehen. The soldier chuckled, shifted his shield, and replied, "That is pretty smart of you, lady. You certainly know your beasts." He gestured down the road. "Remember, 4 blocks down, turn right, and you will get to that hotel." He smiled kindly at her. "Have a nice day, and I hope you enjoy the triumph." As Addie prepared to walk off, she paused, giving him a polite nod. Violin, danke, für Ihre Freundlichkeit, Kayet. She turned and began making her way toward the Venusian, her boots clicking against the pavement. The legionary watched for a moment before calling out, "You too, madam." He then adjusted his helmet and continued his lonely patrol through the quiet streets of the capital. Basically, in a nutshell, what Addie was basically saying, basically she's basically saying she's from Roman Rhaetia, and she's specifically from the province's capital, Augustia Vindelicurium, which is modern day Augsburg in southern Germany in the Bavaria region. And she and her family are staying in Rome for the triumph, and she was basically asking to go to the go to a hotel where her family was staying at to meet up with them, called the Venusian. So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Chapter 4. Wildfire. The rhythmic clicking of Addie's boots eventually merged with the distant low hum of the city center, leaving the street in a heavy artificial silence once more. Clack, 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 clack. For a long moment, Valens and Julia remained tucked into the alcove of that shuttered granary, the shadows stretching over them like a dark shroud. The air was stale, smelling of damp stone and the lingering tang of the soldier's vinegar wine. "She's an optimist," Julia finally whispered, her voice barely a ripple in the stillness. She adjusted the heavy silk of her palla, the deep Tyrian purple looking almost black in the shades. "To travel all the way from the edge of the world just to see a parade of dying foreign beasts from the far edges of Africa and Asia along with some stolen gold? Does she really think the dust of Rome tastes better than the air of the Alps?" Valens did not answer immediately. He peered around the edge of the stone archway, his eyes tracking the red crest of the legionary's helmet. "It isn't about the dust, Julia," he said. "It's a ritual of ownership. Caesar is not merely showing the plebes some lions. He is showing them that the world has been shrunk down small enough to fit inside the city walls. He wants every person in Rome to feel as if the gods themselves have moved into his house. And yet, you're the one acting small," she countered, her eyes flicking to the white-knuckled grip he had on the hem of his toga. "Hiding in doorways like a thief from a single patrolman? You are a citizen of the first rank, Valens. Act like the Republic has not died quite yet." Valens let out a sharp, bitter breath. Caution is not cowardice. In a city full of Caesar's ears, a man in a senator's toga walking through a deserted district looks like a man searching for a secret meeting, and meetings lead to the Mamertine prison. "Let us just move," Julia sighed, stepping out onto the pavement. "The sooner we are back in the light of the Forum, the less likely you are to jump at your own shadow." They began to walk, their footsteps sounding far too loud in the empty corridor of the street. They spoke in hushed tones about the logistics of the day, the triumphs, the rumors of gold-plated chariots, and the thousands of prisoners being led to their deaths. But they had barely covered 20 paces when the air behind them shifted. The rhythmic stride of the soldier had stopped. There was a heartbeat of silence. Then came a sharp metallic thud as the iron boss of a shield struck the smooth cobblestone pavement. "Halt, citizen!" The voice was a jagged rasp, completely stripped of the helpfulness it had offered the provincial girl. Oh yeah, this is the last note. I think it is. There's just a quick note. Okay, just a quick note, really quickly. This chapter actually went for a lot of changes. It actually I think the earliest name I had for chapter 4 was Halt, Citizen, as you can see here, as mentioned by the Legionary. I also thought of other titles such as Trouble in Rome or Stop, Senator. Uh, um, Titles like that. But it actually, yeah, there's actually a lot of titles it went through. But I decided to go for a rather simple title, Wildfire, to represent the growing borderline cult of personality Caesar was growing at this time. And this was still right before he was declared dictator perpetuo, dictator for life by the Senate in the following year, which is crazy. I mean, he probably was going to have be called that title for like the past few years since like the Gallic Wars and the Caesarian Civil War, but I think Wildfire was a fitting title because it represented a growing hysteria that split Rome between support to Caesar and it basically represented the split between Rome, between supporting Caesar and being against Caesar, between the people of Rome. So yeah, but let's continue. It was the voice of a man who held the power of life and death on the edge of a blade. Valens and Julia froze. They turned slowly, keeping their hands visible. The legionary was standing 20 feet away, but he had already closed half the distance before they had fully turned. This time, he did not approach with a casual swagger. He moved with a cold, predatory focus. As he stopped, he raised his scutum firmly. It was not a defensive posture. He was not crouching or hiding his chin behind the rim. Instead, it was a secure, dominant stance. The heavy rectangular shield was held high and centered. A wall of blood-red wood and iron blocking their path. His hand gripped the internal handle tightly, his knuckles white. The streets are cleared for the precision by the order of the dictator, the soldier said. His eyes narrowed beneath the bronze brim of his helmet. He did not look at their faces first. He looked at their hands, then their clothes, then back to their hands. Why are the two of you lingering in the shadows of a vacant district? This is not the path to the viewing stands. Valens cleared his throat, trying to summon the gravelly authority of his father. We are simply returning to our estate, officer. We choose the side streets to avoid the crush of the crowds near the Villabrum. Surely, as a man of discipline, you understand the value of a clear path. The soldier's lips curled. He stepped closer. The smell of oiled leather and iron grits radiated off him. The lorica hamata on his chest jingled softly with every breath. I understand that the shadows are where the rats gather, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low pitch. A man wearing a toga of this quality in this neighborhood at this hour? It looks like a recruitment drive to me. A recruitment drive? Julia asked, her voice dripping with artificial confusion. For what? We have plenty of servants at home. The legionary shifted his shield an inch higher, the iron boss glistening. Do not play the fool, lady. I have seen your kind before. The old Romans. The one who whisper about liberty while the dictator is out bleeding for the borders. Are you hiring a street gang? Looking to pay some Sabura thugs to throw stones out of a chariot? Maybe disrupt the order of the day with a few well-placed fires, huh? That is an absurd and treasonous accusation. Valen snapped, his voice not sorry, his face reddening. I am a citizen of standing. My family has served in the Senate for 3 generations. The Senate? The soldier spat, as if the word were a piece of rotten meat. The Senate is a room full of ghosts and old men who have not felt the weight of a pilum in 20 years. Caesar is Rome, and anyone who is not for Caesar is rot in the grain supply. He moved even closer, his scutum now a mere foot from Valence's chest. The soldier was tall, but the way he carried himself, the rigid pro-Caesarian zealotry burning in his eyes, made him seem like something larger, not just a man, a wall, a warning, a piece of Caesar's will given armor and breath. Maybe I should take you both to the barracks for a formal inquiry, he said. We can see how well your family name stands up under a centurion's questioning. We have been told to look for conspirators. You look like the type who thinks he is important for the new law. Julia saw the way Valence's jaw was working. He was about to say something foolish, something proud, something that would get them arrested, or worse. She stepped in front of her brother, her movements slow and deliberate. She did not look offended. She looked like a woman dealing with a minor annoyance, like spilled wine or an improperly folded garment. Legionary, she said smoothly, reaching into the silken pouch at her waist. You are clearly a man of great discipline, a true pillar of the dictator's vision. My brother is a man of many words, but as you can see, he is quite harmless. He simply misses the sound of his own voice. Valens turned his eyes sharply toward her. Julia ignored him. She pulled out several silver coins, the metal flashing brilliantly in the morning sun. She held them out on her open palm, right near the top edge of his shield. The denarius had been the standard Roman coin since its introduction during the Second Punic War in 212 BCE, remaining in use well into the Imperial Age. These coins were usually small, bright pieces of high-value silver, often light to medium gray in color, and typically measured between 18 and 21 millimeters in diameter. Some bore the face of Roma on the obverse, the goddess who personified the city itself. The city and the Roman nation, often shown wearing a distinct Etrusco-Corinthian helmets. On the reverse, some carried images of the Dioscuri charging on horseback, while others show divine or military imagery meant to show every hand that touched them of Rome's power. The coins in Julia's palm flashed like captured sunlight. It is a long walk to the barracks, Julia continued, her voice like velvet, and the sun is growing hot. Surely a man of your dedication has more important things to do, such as ensuring the main thoroughfare is clear for the Great One's arrival, than escorting 2 bored aristocrats through the dust. She lifted her hand slightly. Take this for your diligence. Consider it a contribution to the welfare of the men who keep us safe. The soldier's gaze moved from Julia's face to the silver. The hard, fanatical glint in his eyes did not vanish, but it was joined by a flash of basic greed. He looked up the street, then down, making sure the silence remains unbroken. With a movement so fast it was almost a blur, his hand shot out from behind the shield and snatched the denarii with a sharp metallic clink. He stepped back, lowering the scutum just enough to let them pass, though he kept his body squared toward them. Move along, he grunted, his voice still harsh, but no longer reaching for his sword. And stay out of the dark. The republic of your fathers is gone, Senator. Try not to get buried with it. Valens and Julia did not wait for a second invitation. They walked past him, with their heads held high and their strides long and purposeful. They did not run. Running was for the guilty, but they moved with a frantic sort of dignity, the kind of dignity that tried very hard not to look like fear. As they moved away, they could still hear the soldier behind them. He was not marching, he was standing still, and the silence of the streets magnified every sound. Look at this, the soldier remarked to himself, his voice carrying a tone of genuine, wide-eyed awe. One side, a fine Barbary lion, strong as a mountain, and the other. There was a pause. Then came the faint sound of a thumb rubbing over silver. The face of Dictator Caesar himself, with his name embedded at the bottom in quaint Greek. Look at that brow. Look at that jaw. Way to go, great one. Way to go. Julia and Valens were 30 yards away now, nearing the end of the block. Julia's face had set into a mask of pure cold disdain. Her nostrils flared with every breath, and her eyes remained fixed on the horizon, as if she were trying to scrub the memory of the soldier from her mind. Valens looked even worse. His face was palm. His lips curled in a sneer that was half fear and half fury. Did you hear him? Valens hissed, not looking back. The way he spoke of him? Like a god walking the earth. He did not even care about the silver until he saw whose face was on it. He is most certainly very supportive of Caesar, Julia replied, her voice tight and trembling with deep, quiet anger. Supportive? Valens repeated. Fanatical. She corrected coldly. He did not see a bribe, Valens. He saw a relic. He is not a soldier of Rome anymore. He is a disciple of a man. It is a sickness, Valens whispered, the disdain on his face deepening as they turned the corner, leaving the soldier and his blood-red shield behind in the quiet shadows of the old city. A beautiful, silver-plated sickness. Valens watched the soldier from the corner of his eye for a moment longer, then turned to Julia, his eyes dark with a mixture of fear and fury. It is unsettling, he muttered, his voice barely audible over the distant hum of the city. That, a man like him, a Roman, respects and nearly worships a mortal like Caesar more than he does the Pantheon? There is a reason the goddess Roma represents the city and the republic. She is eternal. Caesar is merely flesh. He looked back toward the intersection, where the coin had changed hands. Roman tradition never allowed a living man to strike his own image upon a coin. It was the ultimate taboo, a mark of kings, to see a common soldier marveling at a man's face, as if it were a holy relic. Valens stopped. His jaw tightened as he looked up at the towering, silent marble of the surrounding buildings. The weight of the new world seemed to press down on his shoulders. The city around him no longer felt like the Rome of his fathers. It felt occupied by a single name, Caesar, in the streets, on the banners, in the mouths of the soldiers, on silver, in worship. Julia said nothing. For once she did not interrupt him. She only watched her brother carefully, as if she could feel the shape of the thoughts forming inside him before he spoke it aloud. Valens's eyes hardened. Someone must put an end to this reign of tyranny, he stated, his voice trembling with a dangerous, cold conviction. He looked toward the distant roar of the triumphal crowds. Once and for all. Chapter 5. The Triumph. 3 hours later, still October 14th, 45 BCE, early afternoon. The Roman triumph, or triumphus, was the ultimate civil ceremony and religious rite of ancient Rome. It was held to publicly celebrate and sanctify the success of a military commander who had led Roman forces to victory in the service of the state or who had successfully concluded a massive foreign war. By the early afternoon, the shadows had shifted, and dictator Caesar, alongside the veteran men of the 13th Legion, had finally arrived in the very heart of the capital. To mark the end of the devastating Caesarian civil war, Julius Caesar had orchestrated 4 massive multi-day triumphs prior to this one, celebrating his victories in Roman Gaul, Ptolemaic Egypt, Pontus, and Roman Africa Proconsularius. These grand spectacles showcased his conquest of the Celtic tribes during the Gallic Wars, his swift intervention in Egypt, and his fierce legendary victory against King Pharnaces II of the Bosphorian Kingdom. They also celebrated his crushing defeat over the last offenders of the Pompeian Republic during the African campaign, where he broke the forces of King Juba I of Numidia and the Roman commander and politician Metellus Scipio. Now, Caesar was entering Rome for a fifth and final triumph. This multi-day celebration was designed to showcase his absolute military dominance, vast wealth, and uncontested power to the Roman public, firmly solidifying his authority as dictator. This was a historic first. Never before had a single leader held such a sequence of triumphs, celebrating not just foreign conquests, but his ultimate victory in a civil war. As tradition dictated, the procession began with a lavish, sprawling parade, showcasing exotic animals, unarmed troops marching in flawless precision, chains of prisoners of war, and wagons overflowing with captured plunder. Caesar rode at the center of it all, elevated on a large, magnificent 4-horse chariot. The vehicle was gilded in pure glittering gold from its high base down to the spokes of its wheels, its sides adorned with intricate Greco-Roman relief imagery. Pulling the chariot were 4 North African Berber horses, their smooth coats a gentle, pristine whitish brown. They were secured by luxurious reins of vibrant crimson silk, and their backs were draped with thick, padded saddlecloths of brilliant cyan and golden yellow. Dressed in an all-purple, gold-embroidered triumphal toga regalia, Caesar wore the laurel crown upon his brow, looking more like a living god or an ancient king than a magistrate. Standing directly alongside him in a chariot was a public slave boy, no older than 15, thin, smooth-faced, and entirely shaven. The boy played a vital role in the ancient ritual. To prevent deadly hubris, a public slave was required to keep the celebrated commander grounded. At regular intervals, amidst the roaring crowds, the boy leaned in and whispered into the dictator's ear, "Remember, you are not immortal, you are merely a man." Along the packed city streets, the plebeians of Rome erupted in celebration at Caesar's return. The citizens firmly held aloft painted posters and grand portraits bearing Caesar's likeness. Others threw cascades of fresh blossoms from wicker flower baskets into the path of the chariot, while some draped heavy, expensive capes over the marble shoulders of nearby Caesar statues, offering hurried prayers to them. The procession was led by the signifiers of the Roman flag bearers. These veteran legionaries wore the heavy dramatic hides of leopards and panthers over their armor, carrying the sacred vexillum standards of Rome. Alongside them marched the military musicians, their lungs straining as they blew into massive wind and brass instruments. The piercing tuba, the curved bucina, the lupin cornu, and the sharp litus. Other musicians accompanied them with woodwinds and percussion, filling the limestone corridors of the city with the rhythmic sounds of the tibia, clashing cymbalum, and the deep sorry and the deep resonance of a portable hydraulic water organ. Marching in tight formations were the velites, flight infantry and skirmishers drawn from the proletarian, the lowest landless class of Roman citizens. They carried clusters of light javelins, their trusty gladius thrusting swords, sheafts at their hips, and rounded wooden Parma shields. On their heads sat simple metallic Gallia helmets covered by the pelt of an Italian wolf, while the wolf skins provided a layer of padded protection and lent the skirmishers an intimidating, feral appearance. The uniform served a vital, practical purpose, allowing commanders to easily distinguish them from the heavy infantry in the chaos of the battle. Behind endless waves of velites and signifiers marched hundreds of thousands of heavy legionaries, their iron armor glinting in the afternoon sun. Spacing out the ranks were the centurions, the highly experienced professional commanding officers of the legion. The centurions wore heavily decorated segmented plate armor, polished metal greaves called ochreia, protecting their shins, and carried their badge of office, a heavy knotted fine wood staff known as a vitius. Their most defining feature, however, was their sturdy iron helmets, topped with a prominent transverse crest of dyed horsehair and feathers that sat like a fan across their brows, making them easily visible to their men. Riding on horseback close behind Caesar's golden chariot came a vanguard of pro-Caesarian senators and magistrates, their white togas contrasting sharply with the military reds of the troops. Nearby, a mixed group of public slaves and sweaty peasants pulled forward a herd of massive, pristine, white sacrificial bulls. The beasts' horns had been meticulously gilded in pure gold leaf for the upcoming rituals at the temple. Thinking the massive animals, a handful of alert legionaries and commanding centurions kept a tight grip on their weapons, keeping a watchful eye on the crowd to ensure the heavy bulls did not panic or act radically in the overwhelming noise of the triumph. There were also Roman auxiliaries, non-citizen volunteer troops attached to the citizen legions. These men were of diverse, non-Roman origin, including Celtic, Italian, Greek, Mauritanian, Libyan, Numidian, Brythonic, Balearic, and Celtiberian tribes, among many others. The auxiliaries rode on armored horseback, commanding various rugged, sturdy utility breeds of horses. These animals were a mix of local, regional, and imported stocks, many owned by the auxiliary riders themselves, including Hispanic, Berber, Andalusian, Numidian, and Libyan breeds, while commanding centurions and a few legionary cavalrymen rode alongside them. At least 90% of the Roman cavalry consisted of auxiliary troops, particularly light cavalry and horse archers. Consequently, nearly the entirety of the mounted troops trailing Caesar's vanguards were auxiliaries rather than traditional legionaries. Alongside the horses and infantry marched a terrifying contingent of Roman war elephants. These beasts were North African forest elephants, a smaller relative of the massive African savanna elephants. Simple harnesses made of reins, I don't know how to say that, reins, leather straps, and heavy ropes were wrapped securely around their necks and torsos, providing a stable seat for the drivers and anchors for their heavy equipment. The driver, known as a mahout, sat directly above upon the elephant's neck. He carried a traditional sharp iron hook called an Ankusa to steer the beast. Crucially, the Mahout also carried a heavy wooden mallet and a razor-sharp iron chisel. If an elephant panicked and went into a destructive frenzy, the driver would drive the chisel directly into the animal's spine or brainstem, instantly killing it before it could trample the Roman lines. These war elephants carried multi-manned wooden towers called howdahs, which rested on thick padded leather blankets, decorated with distinct geometric patterns. Inside, Inside the towers stood auxiliary archers and skirmishers, wielding exceptionally long-ranged pikes and heavy javelins. Unlike the heavily armored, chainmail-clad elephants used in ancient India or the Seleucid Empire, Roman elephants rarely wore extensive body armor. Burden was expensive, heavy, and unnecessary for the forest elephant's primary shock and awe role. At most, they sported hardened leather headgear or a directive brass front plate across their massive brows. In stark contrast to the martial display, a solemn procession of six Vestal virgins marched alongside the elite ranks. These elite priestesses were tasked with guarding Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, home, and family. Their primary sacred duty was to maintain Rome's eternal flame, an unyielding fire believed to safeguard the very continuity of the state. While they swore a strict 30-year vow of absolute celibacy, they were granted unprecedented societal, legal, and economic privileges otherwise entirely forbidden to most Roman women. Their presence in the parades bridged divine and military power, offering vital spiritual protection and ensuring the gods' continued favor over Caesar's new regime. Bringing up the rear of the exotic military vanguard were the Roman legions' fearsome war dogs, primarily consisting of the Canis molossus, British Mastiff, and Canis pugnax. While these hounds were rarely used to directly assault organized enemy infantry formations, their tactical versatility was highly prized, ranging from serving as early warning camp alarms and base perimeter guards to acting as frontline shock units. To maximize their lethality in close quarter chaos, some of the Romans' most elite war dogs were equipped with heavy spiked metal collars and custom suits of leather or lamellar armor, their deep bays echoing menacingly off the city walls. There were also heavy supply trains pulled by domesticated cattle and sometimes horses like Berber horses, Iberian horses, and Arabian horses, as well as mules. Supply trains contained displays of war booty, including captured weapons, gold, silver, and tapestries during the Caesarian Civil War, as well as the Gallic Wars. The treasures included 2,822 golden crowns, 65,000 talents of captured gold and silver, several hundreds of thousands of silver denarii, beautifully polished tortoise shells, citrus wood, Celtic torques, spears, and downright enormous and immense piles and quantities of Celtic armor and weaponry. These were immense quantities of gold, silver, platinum, and other precious metals and gemstones, captured the weaponry, exotic wildlife, and elaborate moving floats. There was even an extraordinary lifelike statue of Cleopatra VII Philapchiper, adorned in British pearls. Cleopatra had been the ruling queen of Egypt for the past 6 years, since 51 BCE, and although the living and currently reigning Egyptian queen had been staying safely in Egypt, the statue of Cleopatra was given to Rome from the Ptolemies as a gift due to Egypt's support of the Caesarians in the Civil War. There were also notable captured prisoners of war, including captive generals and numerous Pompeian fighters and including numerous hold on. There were also notable captured prisoners of war, including captive generals and numerous Pompeian fighters. Precision regular Precision regular captives were typically sold into slavery, while royalty, enemy generals, and notable soldiers were usually ritually executed in prison. During his lavish triumphs in 46 BCE, Julius Caesar famously showcased a dazzling variety of exotic animals from Africa and Asia to display his absolute power and and the and the vast reaches of his conquests. The processions featured Egyptian crocodiles, green monkeys, baboons, over 400 massive Barbary lions, cheetahs, leopards, and an array of vibrant birds, including peacocks and ibises. Among these creatures, the camel leopardalis stood out as the ultimate symbol of a commander's wealth, reach, and mastery over the known world. Derived from the Greek words for camel and leopard, due to its towering height and spotted coat, camel leopardalis was the ancient Roman term for the giraffe. Caesar introduced the first giraffe to Europe during his Egyptian triumph, unveiling a 16-foot tall peaceful beast was a profound political flex. It proved to the public that the dictator could conquer the deep mythical frontiers of Africa and successfully transport rare living wildlife across vast deserts and seas back to the capital. This particular giraffe was likely a Numidian giraffe. Giraffa camelopardalis, brought from Alexandria as part of the spoils of Caesar's Egyptian campaign. The creature had likely been sourced from Upper Egypt or the regions further south, like modern-day Sudan and Nubia, through the extensive trade networks controlled by the Ptolemaic kingdom. Following the grand procession, the fate of these exotic animals aligned with the brutal realities of Roman entertainment. They were typically moved to the Circus Maximus, or temporary arenas, to be slaughtered in staged beast hunts. The Venationes. Bloody display symbolized the total subduing of foreign lands and the squandering of conquered wealth for the raw entertainment of the Roman public, a cultural obsession with blood sports that would eventually culminate in the construction of the Colosseum more than a century later. All right, here's another German chapter, guys. Yeah, this is the second and last chapter in Julius Caesar 2026 that has German. Just as a little quick note in advance, but hey, it's another German chapter. So yeah. Let's continue. We're almost done with the video. Chapter 6. Allo aus Africa. Standing in the heart of Rome during the triumph, Valens and Julia watched as the plebeians celebrated Julius Caesar's return with an atmosphere of pure, unwavering devotion. The plaza was filled with makeshift pens holding oxen, cattle, mules, domesticated Bactrian and dromedary camels and sheep, alongside rows of wooden crates filled with cooing doves. Some of these animals, sorry, some of these animals were being sold for ritual sacrifices. Rows of wooden tables were manned by money changers, many of them operating beneath the shade of the royal stoa, whatever that is. Merchants shouted across the plaza, loudly haggling over exchange rates as they swapped Roman denarii, Greek drachmaea, Levantine and Hasmonean shekels, Iberian and Gallic coinage, Persian darics, and other foreign currencies. There were people throwing fresh baskets of flowers at marble statues of Julius Caesar, wrapping expensive capes around them, placing olive crowns upon their heads, praying towards the monuments, and waving the Roman standards in their directions. The population of Rome had swollen with hundreds of thousands of visitors, soldiers, provincial tourists, merchants, and opportunists. At the city's marketplaces, vendors, traders, restaurants, owners, and other business owners sold cheap foreign goods such as Egyptian linen scarves, Gaelic wool cloaks, and North African pottery. They also sold soldiers' loot and valuable personal items plundered from Gaul, Egypt, and North Africa. Fast-working local artists sold often crude wood panel paintings and sketches of Caesar and his most famous victories. There were even luxuries on display, high-end high-end silks and spices, exotic perfumes and oils from the East, all of which had been heavily showcased in the parade and were now seeing an uptick in demand at premium market stalls. Many business owners sold luxurious commemorative souvenirs, religious items, street foods, quick refreshments, black market plunder, political propaganda, and costly goods meant for elite visitors. Valens allowed a dry, humorless chuckle, shaking his head as he looked out over the crowded forum. Caesar had practically dragged the entire world back with him. He muttered under his breath, just to dump it all off at the foot of the 7 hills of Rome. He glanced toward Julia, his expression stiff with disdain. The Civil War had ended in Caesarian victory across Hispania, Italia, Graecia, and Africa. After 4 years, the Pompeians have been finally defeated, I'm afraid. Julia's eyes remained fixed on the crowd, and so have the Numidians, the Ptolemies, and the forces of Pontus. She continued glumly, now that Pompey is dead, there's no one left who can truly challenge Caesar. He has purged and is still purging the Senate and the patrician families, leaving almost nobody in the Senate who can oppose him. Valens smacked his lips, his gaze distant. Pompey, he murmured, the only man with the spine to stand up to Caesar. Julia nodded, picking up the thread. Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus was a true champion of our order. He was not just a brilliant statesman. He was a Roman titan who bled for the Republic. He proved his genius across the known world, from a social war and Sulla's civil war to the Sertorian and Third Mithridatic campaigns, he marched through the east, intervened in the Hasmonean civil war, and fought Caesar to the bitter end of his own civil war, only to be broken and assassinated on a foreign shore. It still infuriates me how it happened, Valens muttered, cracking his knuckles. Pompey and the Senate finally realized the monster they helped create, but they were too late. When they ordered Caesar to disband his legions in 49 BCE, the tyrant simply crossed the Rubicon and plunged us into madness. And Pompey was the only one who could truly match him. Julia added softly, looking around to make sure no Caesarian guards were listening. Even when Caesar pursued him across the Adriatic, Pompey held his ground. He broke Caesar's lines at Dyrrhachium. Dyrrhachium. I think I butchered that. If only those overconfident senators had not forced his hand into an open engagement. Persalus was a slaughter. Caesar's tactics entirely crushed Pompey's superior numbers. Her voice hardened, and the ultimate insult, our great general fled to Egypt, seeking sanctuary, only to be treacherously murdered by the boy king Ptolemy's advisors. They butchered a Roman titan just to appease a conquering dictator. Through the roaring din of the crowds, a familiar voice suddenly rang out in that strange northern tongue, laced with pure wonder. Oh, by the way, the Ptolemy that Julia mentioned, it was Ptolemy the 13th, by the way. I think I'm not sure. I might be wrong. I think it was. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it was the 13th. Yeah, I think it was Ptolemy the 13th. Unglaublich. Der Triumph ist nicht mehr keine Werte, als ich dachte. Valens and Julia turned their heads and caught sight of Addie once more. The young artisan from Augusta was completely swept up in the festive chaos, navigated the crowded marketplace stalls for arms piled high with newly purchased treasures. Peeking out from her bundled cloak were fine terracotta votive figurines of Venus, a beautifully etched glass drinking cup celebrating the victory, a few neatly tied sacks of roasted chickpeas, and a bright, freshly woven laurel wreath she had brought to commemorate the day. Her thick brownish blonde her thick brownish blonde hair was slightly windswept, and her heart-shaped face was bright as she stared at the passing floats. She was entirely oblivious to the two patricians watching her from the shadows, her attention utterly consumed by the magnificent, sprawling spectacle of Rome. Valens stepped forward, his patrician composure masking his underlying disdain. "Excuse me, madam," he said calmly, his Latin clear and measured. "May I ask you a question?" Addie spun around, her voice brightening as she recognized the gentle, manly tone. "Ja, natürlich, dürfen, Saya," she replied politely, adjusting the heavy bundles in her arms. Valens cleared his throat, gesturing vaguely toward the bustling marketplace and the celebrating crowds. "I see you have been quite successful with your purchases. Tell me, what are the rumors regarding the grand donatives and payouts that Caesar had promised to the public today? What exactly is he distributing to the masses?" Addy shrugged casually, speaking as if discussing everyday market prices. Kasar, Hat, Jimdem, Romishan, Buger, Bjorger, etwa 400 Sesterzen, Jeben, seine Soldaten erhielten Jevelis 20,000 Sesterzen, das entspricht ungefähr zwei unserer Sieg Heeres gealteren Centurionen und Tribunen erhielten jedoch das Doppelte, bis sei Hongse Verfacke dieses Betrags insgesamt gab 600 Millionen Sesterzen aus politische Loyalität und zu erkaufen und seine Miane zu belochen. Violence was struck dumb. The scale of the payouts to the legions, not to mention the staggering fortunes freely given to the commoners, was financially insane. It was the treasury break-in, an open bribe, sorry, not a bride, an open bribe, a deliberate attempt to dismantle the power of the aristocracy by purchasing the loyalty of everyone beneath them. He let out a dry, slightly nervous chuckle, adjusting his toga. Clearing his throat, he leaned forward, trying to maintain his rigid formality. I see. And tell me, where exactly did Caesar manage to procure all these exotic beast animals passing through our streets? From which corners of the earth did he drag them? Addy answered matter-of-factly, entirely unbothered by the immense scale of the conquest. Saya werden nicht glauben, aus welch Reisigen Gebieten jenseits der Grenzen der Republik all diese Bestien stammen. Hat diese Bestien quer durch Afrika und Asien bringen lassen. A heavy knot of concern tightened in Valence's chest. A lavish triumph was one thing, but a general who could command resources from the ends of the known world was a direct threat to the Senate itself. Yet he kept his posture straight, nodding for her to continue. Addy eagerly began listing the locations, counting them off on her fingers. Numidian, Mauretanian, Arabian, Egypten, das Nital, Persien, Afghanistan, der indische Subkontinent, Kassa hat sogar Tiere aus China mitgebracht, sowie aus den westlichen Regionen Indiens und Vietnams. Tielen, Süd- und Südwestasiens oder Wein sei Latin sprechen Sinea. Violence stared at the foreign girl in a state of pure confusion, mixed with profound dread. Caesar's shadow did not just loom over Rome anymore, it spans the entire world, undercutting everything the patricians stood for. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, but he forced himself to maintain his rigid composure. And what of the games themselves? What forms of entertainment and mass spectacle has he brought to appease the plebeians? Addie's face remains pleasant, completely missing his stiffening posture as she listed off the massive events. Abgessen von den Tieren, die aus Afrika, China und Indien mitgebracht hat Ceasar, etwas völlig verrücktes getan, Elias in der Nähe des Tibers einen riesiges eigens dafür angelegtes Becken errichten, dort eine Echete Sichalt zu Vernal Salten Tausenden von Kosten von Gefangenen und Verbrechern kämpfend auf Echet Kajakchefen besum Tod, nur die Massen zu unterhalten, zu dein Spielen Gehören aus gigantische Gladiatorienkämpfe und natürlich der erste große Auftritt der Giraffe in Europa, die in der Arena gegen in Rudel Löwen antreten musste und das spektakularste zum Abschluss der Feierlichkeiten war Ceasar nackt in einem dramatischen Rahmen von Versieg Elefanten, der brennenden Fackeln, ein Ehrenrüssel, Drachen zu sehen, Privathaus gelichtet. Violence tightened his jaw. Fabricated lake built on a whim of temporary show of slaughter, a personal escort of elephants, burning torches held in their trunks, a city screaming itself hoarse beneath the shadow of one man. It was not a celebration, it was a coronation. He managed one last question. How long will the triumph last? Addie replied simply, Der eigentische Triumphzug der Erde via Tage ähnlich wie die anderen Triumphzüge in Afrika, Gallien, Ägypten und Pontus, die umfassenderen findlichen Spiele, Bankette und sportlichen Veranstaltungen erstreckten sich über 10 bis 14 Tage. Valence cleared his voice again, shifting the conversation away from the terrifying scale of Caesar's conquests to something simpler, something more grounded. And what of your own plans, madam? How long do you and your family intend to stay in Rome before you begin your journey home to... Where did you say you were from again? Augusta Vinilicorum, had he clarified with a friendly smile, nodding as she adjusted her parcels. Oder wie wäre es auf Deutsche neinen Augsburg? Ich bin hier mit meiner Familie, die Festlichkeiten zu genießen. She looked down the streets toward the vibrant stalls. Wir werden die Nachten sowie Wochen hier in Rom bleiben und Wein, der Triumph und die Spiele vorbei sind, kehren wir nach Hause zurück. 2 weeks. 2 more weeks of the capital being flooded with provincial outsiders, all completely in a Rome to a dictator who brought their loyalty, the plunder of the world. Violence swallowed. The rising knot knots of dread in his throat, forcing his patrician mask back into place. He offered a stiff, polite nod. I see, Valen said, his voice flat but formal. I wish you and your family a safe journey back to the north when the time comes, madam. Addie brightened, offering a respectful nod in return. Vielen Dank, mein Herr, ich wünsche Ihnen und Ihr Vegetarier auch einen wunderschönen Tag und eine sichere Reise, wohin auch immer Ihr Weg sei führt. With that, she turned and continued down the busy street, her boots clicking against the pavement as she vanished into the swirling, cheering crowds of the Roman marketplace. Valen stood in place for a moment, watching the spot where she had been. Then he turned back to Julia.